With the summer 2025 movie season coming to an end, and I had a really good time at the movie theater this summer, we are now turning the page to the fall movie season. So now I am here to give my 5 most anticipated movie releases that are coming out this September. At number 5, one battle after another. Even as a lover of movies, I'm going to admit something that's going to kind of make me sound like not a lover of movies. I have admittedly not seen a Paul Thomas Anderson movie before, and he is the writer, director, and producer of this movie one after another. So for those of you who also don't really know who Paul Thomas Anderson is or some of his work, some of his movies include Magnolia, starring Tom Cruise from the late 90s, and then a couple years after that, there was a movie called There Will Be Blood, starring Daniel Day-Lewis, who some people say is one of the best acting performances of all time in that movie. So a lot of people have many of his movies on their all-time top list of their favorite movies ever. So for many people who saw Paul Thomas Anderson's name attached to this movie, automatically got them really excited for this movie. But again, for me, I've personally never seen his work, so I don't have that same attachment that many people have. So that's semi-tempering my expectations going into this movie. Now, I also don't think the trailer has done this movie any favors as this action thriller. Funny enough, the only thing I really remember about these trailers is you've got this pregnant woman with her belly fully exposed out kind of in like the desert or plain setting, and she's firing off a machine gun. But what ultimately lured me into this movie, and maybe what's going to ultimately lure some of the people in the general audience, was seeing Leonardo DiCaprio attached as the star in this movie. And he is still, in my opinion, one of the best actors working in Hollywood. I absolutely loved his performance a couple years ago in Killers of the Flower Moon. I thought that movie was fantastic. I thought he was really good in it. But anytime I see Leo attached to these movies, starring in kind of major roles in them, that automatically gives me a base level excitement and intrigue going into the movie. So again, since I've never seen Paul Thomas Anderson's work, the trailer didn't move me that much. I'm kind of just going off of what people have said about him and their glowing reviews of him, and knowing Leonardo DiCaprio is attached to this. So I'm kind of going into this movie with a little bit of tempered expectations, but still really intrigued to see where they take this movie. At number 4, The Strangers Chapter 2. Funny enough, I thought The Strangers Chapter 1 was one of the most disappointing movies that I saw last year, especially among the horror genre that I thought dominated and had a really great year last year. So Chapter 1 was pretty much just a retelling of the original The Strangers movie back in 2008, and for many people, The Strangers has kind of become a classic of the 2000s horror genre for them. So The Strangers Chapter 1 was, again, pretty much an entire retelling of that with some small changes, but unfortunately, none of the changes and the things that they did from the original movie just were nowhere near as good as the original movie. And one of its biggest errors is it just showed the strangers way too much in this movie, especially very early off the bat. That kind of took away a lot of the air from the fear and the tension in this movie. The original didn't show them as much, especially in the first half of the movie. You just kind of knew they were lurking around, which added to the fear factor. And there's this kind of, famous scene from that movie where you have the wife and she's sitting in the kitchen, and then there's like a dark background in a room, and you just kind of see the appearance of the main stranger come up and then quickly go back in. And again, that movie was just missing that. You see them way too much in this movie. So why am I now excited for Chapter 2 after kind of pretty much bashing Chapter 1? And that's a fair question to ask, but for starters, now in Chapter 2 and Chapter 3 to come after this, these are going to be new stories to this. So all of these movies were actually originally shot, back to back to back together. But after feedback from the first movie, the creative team went through 20 days of reshoots for these movies after the feedback. So my hope is that they took kind of what the audience said after that first one, what they did and didn't like, and incorporated those changes. And again, these are going to be new stories that we haven't seen in the Strangers chapter before, so we're not going to know what's coming in these movies like we did in the first one. So I'm hoping that kind of just extra layer of not knowing what the story is adds a little bit of excitement and fear to this next chapter. Coming in at number 3, The Conjuring Last Rites. So admittedly, up until a couple weeks ago, I've actually only seen the original Conjuring movie. I saw that movie, came out back in 2013, back when I was in college with my wife, who was my girlfriend then, and her younger brother, who was, I think, in elementary school or middle school then, but it absolutely freaked all of us out. So I still have very vivid memories of the original The Conjuring movie to this day, but I hadn't seen the rest of the movies up until we started kind of a binge watch in the past couple weeks. And in doing this binge watch to get ready for this final and last installment of The Conjuring, which I think is only a final installment of the main characters, the Warren story, because I do believe that this universe is going to continue with future movies and TV shows. 2 things caught me kind of by big surprise with this franchise. 1, this universe is pretty damn big. I had no idea that there was 8 movies attached to it. There's, I think, technically 9, but there's this movie called La Llorona that is set in the Conjuring universe, but it's not a technical official installment in it. So I'm just going off what Wikipedia says off of it. So there's 8 movies attached to it. And again, based off of a movie that aired in 2013, the original The Conjuring, that's a lot of work for a franchise just in the past 12 years. And number two, and maybe even a bigger surprise for me, this is easily the highest grossing horror franchise at the global box office ever. These movies have accumulated over $2 billion at the global box office. So this franchise has a pretty big following. Again, I didn't necessarily know that. I didn't know that this was kind of like the MCU for a lot of horror fans. And again, as an admitted movie lover, I actually only recently got back into horror movies and the horror genre a couple years ago. I haven't really been a big fan of this genre, especially seeing them in theaters when I was younger. They always just kind of freaked me out. Funny enough, maybe it was seeing The Conjuring back in college that freaked me out enough to say, you know what, I'm just going to give these movies a break for a little bit. So that's kind of the reason that I didn't necessarily know much about the Conjuring universe. So with all that being said, I pretty much enjoyed most of the movies that we've seen during our binge rewatch. We've watched 4 of them, so we've got another 4 to go. So I'm invested in this universe now, and I'm excited to see how they wrap up the Warren story in The Conjuring: The Last Rites. Now going to my top 2 films, starting with number 2, The Long Walk. This movie is based off of a Stephen King novel, and the trailer that I saw to this was one of the better trailers that I have seen this year. The plot is set in this kind of dystopian America, and you have all of these young men who are volunteering to go on this long walk. And the premise of it, though, is they're being escorted by the military, and they have to maintain a pace of 3 miles per hour. And if they ever walk slower than that, or they end up stopping, then they are shot dead or they're killed in some manner by the military. So all of these young men who are doing this long walk have to keep walking to see who is the last man standing, or should I say walking. Mark Hamill is playing the major in this movie, who's kind of running this military operation that is escorting these guys walking. But what really caught my attention in this movie was a couple months back, I think I was scrolling on Twitter, and I saw that David Johnson was attached to this movie as a star in it. And if you don't know who David Johnson is, he is a young up-and-coming actor, a British actor who I first saw on the big screen last year as a co-star in Fede Alvarez's Alien Romulus. He played Andy, the synthetic, to the other main character in Alien Romulus, and I thought he had a really great performance in that movie. So when I saw that this was kind of his next follow-up film after Alien Romulus, I got really excited because I thought his performance in Romulus was one of the best performances in that movie. And another reason that really piqued my interest into this was I saw that J.T. Molnar was the writer of this movie. Again, this is based off of a Stephen King novel, so I'm not sure how much is, word for word, line for line, chapter to chapter adapted into this movie. But if you don't know who J.T. Molnar is, he wrote and directed one of my favorite movies last year in Strange Darling, and it is this psychological thriller that was told in 6 chapters in a non-linear fashion. And I'm not going to spoil it anymore for you. If you haven't seen Strange Darling, highly recommend going to see it. Rent it if you can. Don't watch a single trailer. Go into it as blind as possible to maximize your experience. But that movie was really good. I saw it in theater. So that really excited me to see that J.T. Molnar was attached to this movie as the writer. And finally, early reviews and reactions to this movie have just started to come out on social media, and they've been pretty overwhelmingly positive from what I've seen. Maybe the algorithm's just hitting because I liked one and now I'm just seeing only good ones. But for me, they look like they've been pretty positive for this movie. So I'm going into this one with pretty decently high expectations. So I'm really excited to see what this movie turns out to be. And coming in at the number 1 spot, Him. Just like I thought that The Long Walk had a really strong trailer, I thought Him's trailer was even better than The Long Walk. So off the bat, you already have a couple big names attached to this movie. You've got Marlon Wayans as a co-star acting in this movie, as well as Jordan Peele's Monkey Paw Productions as the production company for this movie. And as both a sports fan, especially of the NFL, and a newfound fan of the horror genre, this movie couldn't be any more up my alley, and it's been one I've really been looking forward to for a couple months now. Another reason this movie spiked my interest a bunch is I've always grown up around sports. My friends have grown up around sports. I now have kids of my own who are entering recreational sports, so I've been around and know kind of, travel leagues with youth sports kids, the private coaches a lot of these kids and families do, and the pressures that are involved in a lot of these young kids and trying to be the best that they can be. So that premise alone had me really excited because I kind of understand a little bit of that, which leads into the premise of this movie. The movie is about a young up-and-coming quarterback who goes to this kind of private facility to train with this older, famous quarterback who's being played by Marlon Wayans in this movie to become the best version of himself that he can be. But as the trailer goes, if you see the trailer, it turns into this dark and sadistic twist of essentially how much are you willing to sacrifice to become the best that you can be. And with that premise, it has an absolutely perfect release date. It's releasing during the first early stages of the regular season for both the NFL and college football season. So for me personally, someone who has Sinners as his favorite movie of the year and one of the better horror movies of the 2020s, I personally think that him could top that for me this year. Like I said, I'm really excited for this movie. I think this movie has a lot of potential. So that is my number one most anticipated movie that is coming out in September.